You please join me with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. Employee notice has been posted. We can proceed with the approval of the minutes. Are there any comments, suggestions, modifications to the minutes of August 21st? Hearing none, do I have a motion for approval of minutes?
So moved.
Second. Second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. One left. Either one. We have one abstention. Yeah, we weren't here, that's correct. All right. Approval of the agenda. I'm aware that a couple of applicants have pulled their rezoning request. And so we will not be hearing those this evening, but they will be deferred to a subsequent meeting. Not sure if that'll be next month or the subsequent month. It'll be next month. That would be item number 10, zoning map amendment request for 2 acres on 2706 Trask Parkway from T2 rural neighborhood to C4 community center. And number 11, zoning map amendment rezoning request for 6.26 acres at 186 Cherokee Farms Road from T2 rural to T4 neighborhood center. With those, do I have approval for modification to remove those from the agenda?
Yes.
Any objections? No. All right. Okay, those then the remaining agenda will be maintained and we'll move forward with our agenda. I've got some handouts were just forwarded to me about persons wanting to make comments. I see most of the comments are relating to the issues that were on the agenda. And so if you're still here when well, I'm not sure how we can do that. I will do it this way. If you'd like to go on record of making a comment on one of the proposals that's been removed, I think that's appropriate and okay to do that. So we'll do that during the general comments to be made by citizens on non-agenda items. So I'm just going to call your name, and if you would come up during to the speaker, introduce yourself, and share with us your 3 minutes. I want to read this for public consumption. Every member of the public who's recognized to speak shall limit comments to 3 minutes and observe the following protocol. Address the chairman in speaking, avoid disrespect to this council to commission and any other personalities. Confine yourselves to questions under the jurisdiction of the commission. Be mindful and respectful of those who are present or others who may be watching on television. Okay, Tony Crisatello, you have public comments, 3 minutes, please.
Good evening, members of the Planning Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you.
He can't hear.
I'm here tonight to inform you that
Move that a little closer to you, Tony, we can't quite hear it.
I'm here to inform you that the Planning Commission recommendation in regard to the application that I made before you on June the 6th, 2021 was not forwarded to the County Council in a timely manner, and they did not proceed according to the law adopted by the county government. Now, I wrote a letter or an email to the county council. As of yesterday, I found out that there was going to be a meeting of the Natural Resources Committee that would deal with my issue, or thought that would deal with my issue, but because it was an executive session, I was not able to attend, so I couldn't speak. So I wrote an email, and I said as follows: I am emailing you regarding an urgent matter. It is in regard to the Binden Plantation. I am the applicant of the county government for a text amendment to the comprehensive plan. I have a right to be heard by the county council, having first received a favorable recommendation from the planning commission. These rights are equal to those of the land purchase or property of Binden Plantation. I have reason to believe that the reason that they met yesterday was because of a land purchase. Furthermore, there is a conservation easement that the county government paid out of the Rural and Critical Lands Program of $2.5 million. It would be well advised that any such sale correctly recognize the spirit and intent of the conservation easement. That's especially true if federal money from NOAA is involved from the kelp program. I mention that because it's in the conservation easement that Binden Plantation was #2 in the nation rated with regard to kelp. I called NOAA and found out that in fact an application was in fact received. Now, I will say to you that I wrote a letter to the Planning Commission, to the County Council, and I said, it is surprising that I find myself required to inform you about the county government's law governing the decision-making process in the Beaufort County Development Code. I have enumerated the pertinent sections for your referral: 7.48, 7.49, dealing with the powers, duties, responsibilities of the Planning Commission and the County Council. It says, interestingly enough, in those two sections, as promptly as possible in consideration of the interests of the applicant. I am the applicant. I received 0. What I got was I received no answer, no yes, no, nothing. I got 0 from the county government. Now, what I would say to you is this, that the county council is in error with respect to its own law. If this could happen to the former planning director, it can happen to anybody. This is serious stuff. Where the county council breaks its own law is very serious, because when it does, it's saying that do not do what we do, do as we say. That never works. If someone says to you, I don't want to build a river buffer setback with natural vegetation, I'm going to put roses there. That happened to me at Berkeley Hall. The developer said that to me because women had long stockings and didn't want to have their legs affected by the river buffer. I was told that by a developer. If a developer wanted to build a shopping center and put parking in and didn't want to meet the parking standards, what is he going to do? If the county council doesn't obey by its own laws, how do we expect private property owners to obey its law? You cannot expect people to do what you say if you do not do what you do. Now, I would tell you this, that in the conservation easement it says that if you change the conservation easement, you need to go to a court of competent jurisdiction. If you change the conservation easement, you need to go to a court of competent jurisdiction.
Respectfully, Mr. Costello, your 3 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, I would only say this this has never happened in the history of Beaufort County, where a recommendation from the Planning Commission was ignored by the County Council. If it happens to the former planning director, it can happen to anybody. This is very, very dangerous stuff. And I would say that it would be well advised for the Planning Commission to once again inform the County Council that a decision was made by the County Planning Commission and forwarded to the County Council. And I would suggest that maybe you ought to not hear anything in regard to future amendments to the comprehensive plan or comprehensive plan until this is currently dealt with properly. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tony. Mr. Merchant, do you want to make any comments regarding this?
The only thing I will say is that it's on the agenda for County Council for the September 13th meeting.
It's on the County Council agenda for September 13th?
Yes.
They had it at the Natural Resources Committee meeting yesterday. It was an executive session. I was not invited to speak.
Yes,
Mr. Chairman, may I?
yes,
My name
please.
is Chuck Atkins. I'm Assistant County Administrator for Development and Recreation. It was not on the Natural Resources Committee meeting yesterday because the meeting was held on Tuesday. Yesterday was agenda review for County Council, and it was put on the agenda and it was forwarded from the Natural Resources Committee, which was Tuesday, to next Monday's council meeting, which is the 13th.
All right, thank you for your clarification.
You're welcome.
All right, let's move forward. I have a comment here from Deborah Holbrook regarding Cherokee Farms Road rezoning.
Yes, I was just, yeah, I live at 39 James Habersham, and there's been a zoning board that we drive back and forth past for a month, and I was called, I wanted to ask what that was for. I look like I'm the only person from the neighborhood, but
Well, they filed for a rezoning request of the 6 point, it's on the agenda here.
what is it to be zoned for?
Well, they're asking for a zoning from T2 rural, which it's currently zoned as, to T4 neighborhood center.
For a neighborhood center
Neighborhood center.
by the developer of the neighborhood?
By the owner of the applicant is Ralph R. McCalls. All this information should be on the Z there.
It is?
It should be on that.
That's hard to read.
That's posted. I think it's right at the beginning of the road there, the dirt road that goes back by the property.
Okay, so what I'm asking is, what is it to be zoned for, do you know?
Well, what we're going to do, the classification allows for a neighborhood center, and it could take form in several different fashions, retail outlet, even a commercial outlet. So until there is a file of a development plan, I couldn't tell you what they're proposing. And we'll hear that if you would be interested. It sounds like it'll be back on the agenda next month.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Jesse White, Jesse, you here? Oh, yeah, there you are.
Is that an agenda item? Do you want me to get on it now?
No, it is on the agenda. You're right. That's correct. It will be. So if you would hold your comments till then. All right, so the two, we have another one on rezoning related to that property from a William Muthig. If I'm pronouncing that right? Muthig. Mr. Muthig, can we hold that until we get to that issue? This was open comments and I pulled it. And so was this one by Thomas, Mike Thomas, or Thomas Mike Senior?
Yes.
Okay, we'll hear that also when the issue is discussed, and will be on the agenda. I think it's 3 items from now. All right, so your comments will be taken during that period of time. I'll leave those with you. All right. Okay. Is there anybody who didn't file a comment request who would like to speak at this point regarding issues not on the agenda? Anything on the online? Chris, is there anything online? Libby?
No.
Nothing? Okay. All right. First item for the night is the 2040 Beaufort County Comprehensive Plan, which includes the county atlas and the 2040 action plan playbook. Been a little over a year and a half in the making. We're rounding the final stretch, hopefully. So share with us, please.
Just in time to start the next one.
Yes. Go fast, I'll say that.
Good comment.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. We're excited to bring before you the latest draft of the Beaufort County 2040 Comprehensive Plan. And I'm going to go to the next slide. I guess before we get started, I just wanted to, we found some of these quotes here on the APA website, and I think that they speak to the importance of the comprehensive plan. And I think it would really to kind of give some perspective to the decision you're making today. Yeah. Oh. There we go. And I thought that these are really good, kind of giving an overview of why the comprehensive plan is important. And really, we see it as kind of a very detailed vision statement for the county. I think we acknowledge that we all love Beaufort County and that there are aspects of living here and things that we value about our community, and being able to quantify them, articulate what these things are, and determine what it is that we want to preserve, what it is that we want to protect from what we see as potential threats to our to the quality of life here. That is really what the comprehensive plan is, and it provides it's a document that really gives guidance for decision making, but also has very specific recommendations and actions. So these are just some quotes. The comprehensive plan is a foundational policy document for local governments, so it kind of tells us how to act. It's an important tool for coordinating local decision making. The local comprehensive planning process gives the community an opportunity to step back and see the big picture. And I think that that's a good one. You really start with very broad questions about what it is that we value for the county and what we see is the great issues that we're facing. This is a really important one. It's the legal foundation that legitimizes local development regulations. So we have a zoning ordinance, and it's very detailed, and it tells what people can do with their property. But that zoning ordinance, in and of itself, without the backing of a comprehensive plan, is on very shaky legal grounds. And especially in South Carolina, and I'll say that's something for our state, is that we put a lot of value in the comprehensive plan and require it for local governments who have zoning ordinances. And when you have an up-to-date comprehensive plan, you have more certainty for property owners and for those who want to develop, and also for local officials and how to make decisions. And then ultimately, having a good comprehensive plan and a good process means an informed constituency. So I think that I really like that summary, because I think it kind of reminds us of, I guess the weight of the decision we're making today in revising our comprehensive plan. One of the things that the state requires is that every 10 years, we're required to revisit the comprehensive plan. Every 5 years, we do kind of an evaluation of where we are. So we're at one of those 10-year milestones. We can go to the next slide. And starting out, I think it's important to say that a lot of heavy lifting has been done already. Going back to our 97 comprehensive plan, a lot of important decisions were made and policies set forth when we did the northern and southern regional plans, and so the idea here is not to rewrite the plan, but to really build on those things and decide where we are today and introducing, looking at new issues that we face. So that's one thing when you're reading the document to keep in mind. The other thing is that we really felt this time, and I think you're all aware, we hired Design Workshop, and they were our consultants that assisted us and guided us through the process. But we really wanted to have a plan that was easy to read and that was very straightforward in articulating the ideas of the plan. One of the downfalls that happens with comprehensive plans is that once you add all the data, sometimes it gets mind-numbing. You're looking at a lot of numbers and figures and maps. And when you finally get to the policies, it just makes for a very difficult read. So what we did in this case is that the background portion of the plan is in a document called the Beaufort County Atlas. And the goal there was to take all those, population and land use, natural resource, all the background information, put it in, I would say, a very visually, friendly format with lots of, charts and photographs, to I guess, make the information, pop out and be easy to read. So once you get to the actual document, the 2040 comprehensive plan, the one shown in the center there, it really cuts to the chase in that each chapter, you have a context where you provide, this is, what we've learned about the natural environment. Therefore, what does that mean? And so it immediately launches into the strategies and the action items for each of those sections. And I think that makes for a much easier to read document. When you want to know what it is that Beaufort County is doing about natural resources, that's a much easier amount of information to digest. And most of the essentials there, and if you want to know specifically, okay, where are wetlands, where are soils that limit development, you go to the atlas and that information is there. And then finally, within the plan, there are strategies and then there are actual action items, steps that we could take that could be checked off, a box saying, we've done this thing. It was in the plan. It recommended we do this. We did it. And those types of things are in what we call the action playbook. We've taken all the action items. We've categorized them by short, medium, and long range within a 10-year time frame. Who is going to implement them? And so all of that I think will allow for much better tracking and being able to assess where we are as far as implementing this plan. In addition, in that action playbook is a 10-year CIP. So not only are the action items, but the actual projects, and so we worked with the engineering department to develop a 10-year CIP that is part of this plan.
CIP is,
Capital improvements.
okay, just for the audience.
Yeah. So that's just a real quick overview. You can go to the next slide. Another thing, when I said really built off of, I would say, some solid planning foundation, but we really identified, I would say, three emphases in this plan. The first one is resilience. This has been something within the last 10 years that we have taken a lot closer look at, and that is the impacts of flooding, especially exacerbated by sea level rise and climate change. Being able to assess the risks and decide what are necessary steps that we could take as a local community to be more resilient. The other thing this plan does, and this is certainly something that we've touched on in previous efforts, but it really looks at equitable, is this plan equitable? And Beaufort County is a great place to live, but it's not necessarily as great a place to live for all residents. And so anything that we could do as local government to provide more equity in services and quality of life, we want to make sure that that is an important factor in decision making. And then also unique to place. This is really building off of our community development code, which emphasizes not only where we want to develop, but what is the quality of development, and are we creating true communities that are places that we want to live, or are we just saying this is where commercial development goes here, and it doesn't really create that sense of place. This plan really emphasizes that all of those policies are aimed at building quality communities. So these three themes are woven into the plan. And if you look at the strategies, you'll see a little E in front of it or a little R. That's what that means. It's kind of tying it back to one of those three concepts. You can go to the next slide. Yeah, we can move on. Let's see. I just wanted to real quickly go through that we had a real challenge with the community engagement because, go to the next slide. We had our kickoff workshops March 4th and 5th, 2020. And if you're aware, that was about a week and a half prior to everything shutting down. So we had a really good kickoff workshop and good attendance. We had stakeholder engagement, but then everything was put on hold. And so what we did is we put a lot of emphasis on that atlas in gathering the existing information that we had. And then by the end of summer of 2020, next slide, we had 2 virtual workshops, realizing this is not quite the same as in person. But it was a way to provide some public input into the process during this really difficult time in the middle of the pandemic. We had one specifically related to natural resources preservation and the Green Print Plan, which is a plan that informs our rural and critical lands preservation priorities. And then, next slide, we had another one related to growth management and economic development. So we had a lot of input from those surveys, but online engagement is not necessarily, you're not reaching the same population as when you're in a community. And so one of the things that we did, and this was very difficult, but we were able to have 3 successful socially distanced workshops in October 2020. That first picture just kind of cracks me up that you can't get much more socially distanced than that. But we did have a good turnout, and they were basically set up as open house so that we never had a large group of people at one time. But we did get some pretty good attendance at those. Moving on to the next slide. We presented the very first draft, as you remember, in April 5th. We released the first draft of this plan and opened it up for public comment. And we learned shortly into that process that we really needed to go back out into the communities. We had originally scheduled a public hearing at the Buckwalter Recreation Center, which we had on June 7th, but we followed up with 2 in-person workshops, one at Burton Wells on June 8th and one at the St. Helena Public Library on June 10th. In addition, the council members for St. Helena Island, Ladies Island, Councilman Glover and Councilman Somerville held a joint meeting with the school board representatives and also with the state representatives, and had a very large community meeting. But the focus of that was the comprehensive plan. So really through that engagement and through the public comments, we received very good input and a lot of comments, which, as you're aware, at the August 2nd meeting, we presented back to the Planning Commission. It was a giant spreadsheet with each of the comments and our recommendations for how to move forward. So since that August 2nd meeting, we scrambled as staff to direct the consultant to make the edits. We got that back and finalized on August 31st, and we released this draft to the public and then also to the Planning Commission. So with that, I was just going to go through, I would say, maybe a 20,000-foot overview of the plan, and then any questions that you have, nothing too detailed, or I mean, anything from the most general to the most detailed is perfectly fine. What I wanted to do real quick is kind of walk you through how this is arranged. If you can go to the next slide. Each of the chapters, you'll see a spread like this for natural environment, where we have kind of a general statement, value statement about natural resources protection. Then we have core values, and that really kind of talks about what it is we value about the natural environment and what kind of guides our decision making. If you go to the next page, we have context. So this is basically summing up the information that's in the atlas, in terms of taking stock of our natural environment and natural resources, assessing what we've done, what are the, challenges that we face, and then kind of summarizing what, therefore, we recommend these steps. So when you go to the next page, you get into the heart of the recommendations. So strategies are these items that are in green. And then those are followed up by action items. And one of the things that this plan does that we didn't do before, which I think is important, is we make a distinction between a policy statement, which is saying, for example, for a road network, we recommend a level of service D for all future county roadways. That is more a statement that guides how we make decisions, but it's not something you say, okay, today we have made an improvement, it's level of service D, we check that box and move on to the next. That's a strategy, that's something that guides how we think. An action item is something that is, that's actually actionable and something you could say, well, I'm initiating this action and we've completed it, check the box. Some of them are ongoing, but they are, definitely things that can be done. So that distinction is drawn, and I think that really helps because plans do several things. Having a strategy is important. Many times when we're writing a grant, you have to show that we value these things, and that shows, whoever is, evaluating the grants that we have thought about this. It's in our comprehensive plan. An action item is more kind of saying, we're going to pursue this project over here, we're going to pursue this new policy over here. But they're both important, vital elements of the plan. So just real quick overview, natural environments, a lot of this is, continuing our natural resource protection, strengthening, assessing whether they're working. One of the things that we do in this chapter is that we incorporate the green print plan, recognizing that preservation is one step in preserving the environment, but having good resource protection standards in our ordinances is another thing we can do. And it kind of has a continuum of preservation depending on how important of a resource it is to protect. But this also emphasizes a lot more than our last comprehensive plan, this whole idea of resilience to climate change and sea level rise. And this is important, not only because this is a challenge that the county is facing, but also because the state is now requiring this in comprehensive plans. They require us to address resiliency. And so, our comprehensive plan, even though this is a new policy by the state, we're following, the latest state guidelines. So that's not something that's only in the natural environment section. We address it elsewhere, especially in community facilities and where we cite future facilities. If you go to the next slide, next chapter is culture or cultural resources. Once again, building on what we have done, we have good policies in place to protect historic resources, archaeological resources. We really see, preserving our rural areas and the rural way of life is an important part of this planning effort. Recognizing the distinctiveness of the Gullah Geechee community, acknowledging the importance of farming, fishing, and forestry to the local economy and way of life. And then also, from the input we got, the plan now places greater emphasis on protecting and preserving historic cemeteries. That has come up, several times, since within the last year, but it's been an ongoing issue. Looking at the issue of heirs property and how can we provide more support to families with heirs property, and then also addressing the negative impacts of mining and resource extraction on the local communities. Those are some things that came through our engagement this summer at our meetings and the public comments. Next slide. Economy, looking at what are our existing economic drivers and really emphasizing building on those strengths, especially the military and tourism, promoting the development of a skilled workforce, providing incentives for business recruitment, retention, and expansion, and then calling for creating and strengthening regional and state partnerships, kind of as a foundation for economic development in the county. Some additional comments, and this was something provided by the Port Royal Sound Foundation, is really that our natural beauty of our county is one of our biggest economic drivers. And to recognize that, in that if we develop in such a way that we're really compromising those things that make our community what it is, they could affect, our ability to attract people from elsewhere. Providing additional information regarding brownfield sites and cleanup programs. We have some throughout the county that can be a barrier to economic development. And then looking at opportunities for people living on their own property, for home business and cottage industry, providing flexibility but still protecting the quality of neighborhoods. That's something that we certainly want to be able to continually revisit and make sure we're providing as many opportunities for people, to use their own properties for small businesses. Mobility, this is our new term for transportation section, but really the emphasis, one of the things that has happened in the last 10 years is that we are now an MPO. We have LATS, which is once we reach a certain population threshold, we now are direct recipients of federal transportation dollars. And so Low Country Council of Governments administers that for us. And so we have structures in place and a planning process. So our plan really recognizes, the importance of that cooperation, but we put some more emphasis on, complete streets and promoting a multimodal transportation network. Historically, we have been very dependent on private automobile traffic to get around the county. And so taking whatever necessary steps to provide more transportation choices for residents, promoting as much as possible, rather than building new roads, how much can we maximize the capacity of our existing roads through access management, intelligent transportation systems, providing a network of streets. That's something that we're proposing on Ladies Island. Promoting walking and cycling, and that's something I'll be addressing after this. Supporting the expansion of public transportation and looking at also water transportation, which is certainly something that has great potential, that has a lot of logistical issues, but certainly as we continue to grow, something that could help us in getting around our county. Housing, promoting affordable housing in areas with supporting infrastructure, and making sure that we have affordable housing in close proximity to services and employment. Those are, part of it is a policy of where we're directing affordable housing, emphasizing reducing those barriers. That's something that we always need to be looking at is what are the barriers to developing affordable housing? Are they in our zoning ordinance? Are they in other policies that we have? And being able to provide balance between, so that we could promote affordable housing. And then really calling for the county to be proactive. And that's something over the last couple of years, we've taken steps to establish a regional affordable housing trust fund, which we think will go a long way in when you have an identified funding source and personnel to administer that. That will then really help not only the county but the region, and our municipalities, be able to promote affordable housing projects. We're also recommending an affordable housing land trust, looking at, being able to identify lands and acquire lands appropriate for affordable housing, along with that actively pursuing grants and other programs. In addition, some of the comments that came in and that we've made some revisions, considering reestablishing the Affordable Housing Task Force to provide the continual evaluation of our policies from different stakeholders in the community, and then promoting what we call missing middle housing. This is a term that refers to, if you look at housing as your single family and in your apartment complex, this is everything in the middle, duplexes, townhouses, small apartment buildings. In what ways can we promote that type of housing in a much more, neighborhood scale versus, having to look at kind of the dichotomy of single family versus multifamily. And that provides more equity and, I would say it's more conducive to a walkable community and, creating opportunities for a more mix of incomes of people living in an area. Next slide. Community facilities. Once again, we really focus on sustainability, equity, and resiliency in siting public facilities and delivering public services. Where the government sites their new stations or buildings, a lot of that should follow our land use policies. They should be equitably distributed and also focus on, make sure we're building out of harm's way in terms of, the threats of flooding. We had a lot of emphasis in our public engagement about expansion of public sewer and water into communities with failing septic systems or also with compromised groundwater or very low water pressure that is compromising fire protection in the communities. Promoting a comprehensive approach to waste removal and disposal, developing libraries that meet our current needs as our population, but also reflecting current trends in programming, and then also citing future schools in a way that it's serving our population fairly. So finally, built environment. This is really getting to the heart of a comprehensive plan and its land use component. One of the things that we did as part of this is to look at a build-out analysis, just looking at our current approved plan unit developments and subdivisions, And what we learned is that within the municipalities and within the approved subdivisions in the county, that there is plenty of capacity for future growth. I'm not saying that that's exactly where it's all going to occur, but I think it puts in perspective that we still have we're not at a point where we need to be jumping over the Whale Branch River or over Chowan Creek for future development. We have plenty of capacity within those areas that we have already identified as future growth areas of the county. And that's something important because, we're always getting pressure, there's that to move beyond, where we currently have zoning that supports higher density development. And so that kind of grounds us into, promoting, I would say, making sure that new development is occurring in areas that can support it, have the facilities, the infrastructure to support it, and also where people have much more readily available services and access to employment. So the other thing is that, once again, those themes, making sure our land use policies are promoting resiliency and an equitable development with a sense of place. Those are parts of our current ordinance is designed to do that, and that's a policy that we're carrying forward. Focusing on transit-ready development, this is kind of a fancy word. We do have an expansion of our current offerings for public transportation, and public transportation works better when you have nodes or walkable communities for it to serve. And so part of that is looking at, let's say, an area like Bluffton Parkway or the US 278 corridor as an older shopping center redevelops is an opportunity to promote more of a mix of uses and provide a more walkable community. And so that's one of the things that this plan looks at. And then finally, using our green print plan, recognizing that those areas that are environmentally sensitive, that we may want to take another look at, making sure that we are, future development in those areas is compatible with what the land can support. Go on to the next slide. In the heart of this plan is our future land use map. Every time we do a zoning amendment, we're referring to this. And so that is something that we'll be forwarding as well in this plan. There's not a lot of radical changes from our 2010 plan. I think that it's recognizing that land that we've identified for future growth, there's still a lot of capacity to grow. One of the things you'll notice on here, we have the growth boundary for Beaufort and Port Royal that encompasses most of Ladies Island and Port Royal Island. That is in the plan, but we also have recommendations for growth boundaries in the Yemassee area. And many of you have been following, Yemassee has been growing rather significantly lately. And so we have been working very closely with their staff to try to make sure that our land use policies are aligned in that area. And then really kind of identifying, being able to work with them. This is really a starting point of discussion in our plan. The town is embarking on a plan for the town of Yemassee. It should be this fall, and we intend to work very closely with them as well. They have a very good staff member who's very, interested in regional cooperation, and so we're hoping that's a good opportunity. Another one is that we've been working with Hardeeville and Jasper County, looking at the 170 corridor and future growth of the city of Hardeeville. That's something that we started discussion in the development of this plan that we would like to continue as well. So those are two proposed new growth boundaries that are coming out of this comprehensive plan. And finally, at the end of the plan, you will see focused planning areas. We look at US 278 corridor, 170, Ladies Island, St. Helena. I wanted to draw your attention, if you go to the next slide, we added a new one since the last time you looked at, and that's Yemassee. We sat down with their staff and kind of looked at the area, where they have currently annexed land and, where they see the town wanting to grow in the future. And so we have kind of a rough line that goes along 17 and up just short of River Road. But this is something that we would like to continue discussions with the town about. So, but we're excited about this. I think just having this cooperation with, with the town of Yemassee is really, this is really probably the most we've worked together in the 20 years I've been here. The next one is the action plan, and I think I went over this. This is just a visual. We go through each recommendation or each action item and talk about where it falls in terms of timing, what needs to be invested, whether it's a low, some projects are free, it's enacting an ordinance, or, some may be very expensive and something that we need to make sure is matched with the capital improvements project. And then we identify who's going to do it. And so we're hoping that this will really assist us in tracking the implementation of the plan. And then finally, and this is just a visual, the next slide, this is, we have a very detailed, this is one of about 7 pages of our capital improvements plan, identifying each project within a cost estimate and where it falls within the next 10 years. Also identifies possible additional funding sources. Our next steps right now, we're at the Planning Commission, so depending on, what direction you take, our next step would be going to Natural Resources Committee on October 4th. If all goes smoothly, we would be looking at the next 3 readings of County Council and adoption in November. It has been expressed by County Council they would like to see this adopted by the end of the year. And certainly something we learned last summer is, plans are not something if there are times where you need to take a step back, and we certainly did last summer. So, I say that as a caveat, but this is our goal, and, we will be looking for direction from you and also from County Council on how to move forward.
Okay. Would you entertain questions from the commissioners?
How many changes do you think you've made since you handed out our copy, where we were all given a copy?
Do you remember the number, Libby?
No, I don't.
I would say it was
Hundreds.
several hundred. Yeah, we had a spreadsheet that tracked all the comments. There was some overlap, some of them pointing to the same recommendation, but I would say probably about 100 edits that we sent, from those comments to our consultant.
Do you think we should take a look at them before we vote on them?
Well, so that was one of the reasons that we brought those forward to the Planning Commission at their August meeting. Was that we wanted to make sure we had all the comments and we had the staff's recommendations for how we wanted to move forward with the comments. So we were hoping, certainly it's up to y'all, but we're hoping that was an opportunity for the planning commissioners to.
Well, as you said, there's a lot of changes have been made. I think it's a 189-page document between that and the action plan. A lot of detail. You just hit the 20,000-foot level. But we've seen it. It's been before us at least 4 public meetings of this nature over the last year and a half. Plenty of ample opportunity for public input. I think it's a very, very good document. I applaud the depth that you went into and the extra effort to talk to some of the areas where perhaps there are underserved population where concerns. And there's a lot of that is addressed in the plan. I think it's important for the public to understand this is a living, breathing document, that it can be changed. There's a process for that to happen. This is our first stake in the ground as to how we'd like to proceed with our planning, near term and long term, the next 10 years. Very capable people have been put to task to work on this. You have my endorsement at this point in time. I would like to hear from anybody else that would like to make comments. Yeah, Brandon.
I'd like to congratulate you and the staff and the company that you used in working with this document. It's night and day from 20 years ago when I first came to town, and I can see a lot of work and a lot of thought has gone into it. And I welcome the opportunity to also approve it and move it forward to completion to the county council.
Any other comments by the commissioners? Yes, sis.
I agree with Randy, having worked on the 2000, provided input on the 2000 plan. I think it's so important that we recommend approval because this is a particular moment in time where there may be federal money for infrastructure. And it's absolutely fantastic. You didn't predict this, but you now have a plan that people at the Low Country Council of Governments or within, county council, within the county administration, whomever, you now have a product that you can base for any grant application. So for, federal infrastructure enhancement. So I'm particularly thrilled about the timing of this.
Yeah, I have one question, and I'm sure the public is just dying to know the answer to. This is a 10-year plan. However, we call it the 2040 comprehensive plan. Would you explain one more time why we've done that?
Yeah, it's funny because I've gotten a lot of flack, I think also from the consultant, because I think Town of Port Royal called it the 2030 plan. But, my answer is that, you look out to 2040 in order to make decisions for today. I mean, we're the action items, the CIP, are really meant to be things that could be implemented at a 10-year time frame. But in order to really have a good framework, you're not just looking at what's going to happen in 2030, you're looking 10 years beyond that. Is kind of how I see it.
And you have good demographic and psychographic data to back that up to 2040.
Yeah.
Of course, as that changes, it'll be modified, I would imagine.
Yes, and and it's always, as you mentioned, it's hard to pick a perfect time to do a comprehensive plan because one of the things that LATS is updating their long-range transportation study, and part of that will be, or long-range transportation plan, they're going to be revising the transportation model, which is a lot of what is built into that are population projections. So, and we also are just receiving the initial figures from the 2020 census. So as more information, more data is available, we're going to have to, press on. And so when we develop our transportation model within the next couple of years, it may be slightly different projections than what's in here because we're going to have more information. But I think that's just the nature of planning. You make your best estimate at the time, and then you don't completely tie your hands to what you did. So.
Would any of the public attending care to make any comments regarding the plan? The plan it will continue to stay online, I would. And there are also, I understand, copies in the libraries for people to access.
Yeah, and I've just been informed that we need to print some more, so it's encouraging. So.
Okay. Hearing no further comments.
Just curious, next steps, is there next steps to this now, or?
You just mentioned them.
Yeah, the next step will be, pending, the action of the Planning Commission, it would go to the Natural Resources Committee at their October meeting. And then ultimately, there's 3 readings of County Council. And, really and I'll emphasize, every single one of those is a public meeting. And so there's always opportunity for public input. And, I remember from the last time we went through this, sometimes council will have their own comments and recommendations. So, this is an idealized timeline, but it's certainly it's our goal.
Anything else, Kevin?
Oh, just one quick thing. Rob, you've been so good, you and your staff, about communication. I would just urge you to remind the public that there are, it goes to natural resources, but there are going to be 3 readings before county council. Like, don't ever let up on that. I think, the idea that X number of documents went out to a public library and there are only 3 left, which is, I don't know, like 1% left or something. There's clearly tremendous interest. I know we have seen it a lot, and we, have a fine-grained view, but I would just urge you to keep that kind of outflow of communication.
Yeah, we have an excellent new public information officer who joined us this summer, and he's
Great.
been really emphasizing that fact, that every single time this goes to council or to Natural Resources Committee, that's another opportunity for the public.
Well, it's exciting because it's such a good product, right? So it's, that makes the quote-unquote sell a little less difficult, right? So because it's so good, people are engaged, and that's thanks to you.
Okay. Having no other comments, can I have a motion to approve the 2040 Beaufort County Comprehensive Plan?
So moved.
Second.
Motions has been made and seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. All opposed? I guess that was unanimous.
All right, well, thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay, you're not going too far.
No,
The next thing up is the Beaufort County Connects Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan for 2021. I assume that you want us to affirm its inclusion as part of the comprehensive plan? Is that what you're asking?
yes, what we're requesting is that this, and I have a short presentation,
Right.
but we're requesting this plan be included as an appendix to the comprehensive plan. And I can't remember, have we shared this with the Planning Commission?
Yes.
I know we've been, okay. But yeah, you have the document. We've gone to our regional boards quite a bit with this plan, and I can't remember if we've given you a heads up. But this is Beaufort County Connects is a countywide, and I would say emphasize it's county and municipality, bicycle and pedestrian plan. As you can see from that slide, we've had a number of partners, both the county, the municipalities, different advocacy organizations, Friends of the Spanish Moss Trail, the school district. It really represents, I would say, a broad cross-section of interests in walking and biking. We formed a task force. I wanted to commend the work of, I think you all remember Noah Krebs, who's moved on to the town of Port Royal. He really spearheaded this effort and got this group together and administered it, a lot of it through COVID and through remote meetings, which had its own share of challenges. And Juliana Smith, who is our new long-range planner, has done a really good job in tying up all the loose ends and getting this final product together. So I just wanted to really commend both of their work. Juliana is she's on vacation, so otherwise I'd be having her do this presentation. Just real briefly, when why plan for bicycle and pedestrians? This is really one of those activities or actions that we could take that really achieves a lot of different goals. Having good opportunities for cycling and walking improves public health. It decreases traffic and emissions if it's a viable transportation choice. It provides equitable access to facilities and services, that not everyone can, drive a car. Increased sense of community and place. I've noticed this just on the Spanish Moss Trail. It's really transformed the communities that it has passed through. Reduces collision involving pedestrians and cyclists. Good facilities mean fewer of pedestrian accidents. And then finally, it's a driver of economic success. These things make a region more attractive and raise property values. And so all of those reasons, along with Beaufort County today is a much different place than, let's say, 20 years ago, when the only viable options for riding a bike off of a main road would have been Hilton Head Island. But now we have a good network in southern Beaufort County along the Bluffton Parkway, Buck Boulder Parkway, and 170, and then in northern Beaufort County with the Spanish Moss Trail. And all of those really open up opportunities once you have a good spine, bike network. How can you connect more communities and make it a viable means of transportation? There's really three objectives here. The first is connections, really trying to connect as much as possible communities to our bicycle and pedestrian network. Establishing walking and biking as routine, making it efficient and safe for all residents who wish to do so. And then finally, this is an equity issue. It's creating a free resource available to people who may not have a car or may not be able to drive a car, and it really serves a cross section of our population. Go on to the next slide. The three principles guiding this plan. The first is making connections. As I mentioned earlier, connecting residents to jobs, schools, parks, shopping, so that they have meaningful destinations. So it's not just something solely for recreation. Targeting what we call the interested but concerned. As there are people who are willing to take their bike onto the busiest road and battle traffic, and they would have no problem, riding along any roadway, but that represents a very small segment of the population. There's a large group, I would say maybe the silent majority, who would bike more often if there were safe facilities that were convenient to where they lived. And that's really the group that we're targeting, because that's a group that will change habits if there are facilities available. Not that this plan also looks at road cycling as well. And then also a spine and spur approach, recognizing where the main, multi-use path corridors are and building off of them and making connections to communities. Go on. So we've worked with what we call existing and committed projects. It's a little hard to read on this slide, and I apologize. And then we looked at, how do we make a more complete and comprehensive network? And so that's what you have with our fully implemented bike and pedestrian plan. You can go to the next slide. Within our maps, we have our existing and committed projects, which we're taking as a given. And then what we're proposing are immediate, mid, and long-term bike or multi-use facilities. In the Seabrook area, a lot of this emphasis is on, we have existing pathway along 17, and we have the East Coast Greenway, which is supposed to use 17 and go into Beaufort County. And it's looking at which roads are probably going to be the safest to cycle along, and it identifies in the Dale community, Kinloch and Keen's Neck Road as examples. So once they get down to Port Royal Island, they could get on the Spanish Moss Trail and then continue south and then make their way, toward Bluffton along 170. So that was one factor that fed into this plan. Go to the next slide. And I can go through these briefly, and if you have questions, this is the kind of Beaufort, Burton area, St. Helena Island and Ladies Island. And then we looked at Bluffton, especially around New Riverside, and they have a linear trail over there on an old rail bed along the 170 corridor. And then work with the town of Bluffton on how to build off of not only the existing trail network there, but how to provide more connectivity to the more pedestrian-friendly part of Old Town Bluffton. And then finally, Hilton Head Island, which of course is a leader in the community in developing multi-use pathways. And then finally, we reached out to Hardyville and Jasper County and integrated our plan with what they have in their long-range pedestrian plans. We looked at funding sources, recognizing that this is obviously something that will take a have to look at many different options. The capital project sales tax has been something that is, we're using right now for pathways, and that's an option in the future. Our local accommodations tax, working with LATs when they get federal funds. A lot of those are for not just for road projects, but for multimodal or pedestrian improvements. And as it was mentioned earlier, there's a lot of excitement because there's possibility of more federal dollars being available for these types of projects. And so having this plan in place, kind of like as a comprehensive plan, really positions us well in being able to pursue other funding sources for projects. Okay. Implementation, this is something that we're... Someone's on a Zoom call or... But we've been working with each of the local jurisdictions and their local planning departments. So a similar presentation is we have a schedule of going to each of the municipalities as well. We want to incorporate this into the LATS, long-range transportation study. That's something that is going on right now that we're working with their consultant on, and they're very interested. I think they see this as a kind of a shortcut to the work that they have to do. Developing a funding strategy, really coming up with an annual revenue stream to plan for. We call for creating a staff position, eventually having somebody dedicated to doing this work. This is something that requires a lot of attention to detail. Working to develop a nonprofit advocacy organization for these projects. So all of these, it's really not only a recommendation of projects, but a strategy for how to position ourselves better to implement them. The other thing the plan does is we come up with a prioritization matrix. So if the projects, we have our immediate, short, and long term, but we also have criteria that we look at because there are always changes, always new projects that are being proposed. And so we have a matrix to kind of evaluate those. Is that something that is really building off of our current network and meeting the objectives of this plan, providing net connectivity? Or is it something really just serving one small area? Go on to the... But that's about it. I hope you all had an opportunity to look at the document. I'm willing to answer any questions you have.
How long has this plan been in the making?
I think our first meeting was late fall of 2019. So, through the pandemic, and we've been really, since last spring finalizing the document. But so I guess it was about going on 2 years.
Well, I recall back, it's got to be almost 20 years ago, when the whole idea of pathways and Spanish Moss Trail was kind of a glint in someone's eyes, and people would get together and talk about the opportunities. I can remember being asked to participate in a pathway down 170, which I said, I don't know how that can ever happen. And so, by sticking to it and in recognizing the importance to many people to have that multimodal capability is a big task. And I'm very pleased to see that we have an initial plan that we think is workable, and now it's the implementation that's going to be necessary.
I think it's a lot easier to envision when you have actual pathways.
Absolutely.
Where 20 years ago it was,
Yeah,
it was really hard to...
yeah.
I do have a lot of comments on it. First of all, I heartily approve it. I think it's a great plan. I think it gets the bicyclists off the street, but I don't think it goes far enough. All right. My wife and I go into the town of Bluffton probably 2 or 3 nights a week. In the town of Bluffton, the speed limit is 30 miles an hour, and on any given night, you can see 15 to 20 golf carts parked in the town square, driving around the streets. I look at, when I go by the private schools like the Christian Academy just finished on Buckwalter, on Bluffton Parkway, and the other private school that's just off 170, the traffic is backed up every day for half a mile, 3/4 of a mile, with cars running because their parents are picking up their children at the school. I look at communities like Hampton Lakes, Hampton Hall, all within earshot of Publix and Kroger's. I look at down in Pritchardville where they're building like crazy and they put a new Publix in. Those people, at least in those areas, the bicycle paths should be widened to accommodate the most green transportation we have, and that's a golf cart, all right? Most bikers in this feel that they're very safe going 25 to 30 miles per hour with cars going by. There's also 125 electric bike manufacturers. Now, those bikes go up to 28 miles per hour. I mean, if you're gonna permit an electric bike, all right, on a bicycle path, there's no reason why you can't widen them in certain areas. I'm not talking about the Spanish Moss Trail or, I'm talking about people being able to drive out of their community and go 2 miles to a shopping center, all right? Like in Pritchardville. I mean, we're lucky where I live, we can go to a Food Lion, we can go to a Burger King, we can go to a Dunkin' Donuts, a Cracker Barrel. But most people who want to go shopping are not going in their bicycle. They're getting in their car to go to that shopping center. Because maybe they send their children up for 1 or 2 items. And I just feel that we have to, it's the most green thing of transportation we have besides a bicycle. They're electric. $7.6 billion worth of golf carts will be on the road by 2026. $7 billion. Why? Because everybody's using them to go green. And we are ignoring that fact, that it's a key. Now, can everybody get a golf cart? No. Do the wealthy people or people who are retired get a golf cart? Yes, all right? But just think if you can take 30 cars out of that line from people who live within 2 miles every day, the emissions that are going to be taken down. All I'm saying is that we should think about people who are in close proximity. I mean, we could put up signs, no golf carts permitted beyond this area. I saw a sign today that said, no motorized carts. Will there be people that break the rule? Yes, just like people who speed on 278 in a 45-mile-an-hour zone going 60 miles an hour. So I'm just asking you, I know it can't be done now, but it has to be considered for future means of transportation. So hopefully you will take that into consideration. I don't know how anybody else feels, but.
Have you looked at that issue? Have you looked at golf cart transportation modes for certain hubs?
That was not part of the.
That's right, this is a bicycle pedestrian
Yeah.
plan, not
I
to
know, but-
mitigate traffic. I mean, I think that's a town of Bluffton issue to try to mitigate.
Yeah, but it's also, it gets those people. I mean, think of all, have you seen the amount of cars that back up picking up their children at private schools? It's outrageous. Some of those people can get off the road.
What's a golf cart have to do with parents picking up their kid at a park?
They could use a golf cart if they have it.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't think
I'm just
we're
gonna say, in my community, most people use their golf cart to go up shopping,
Sun City, yes.
all right? But if Hampton Lakes had that capability, you don't think they would ride to Publix? Oh, please. I know I
I live in one of those communities, I know,
Yeah.
so.
As a cyclist, I'm very pleased with this plan.
No, so am I, but I just think in certain areas, I think did you look where it said that they all feel safe with cars, with the exception of one group going 25 to 30 miles an hour? Will electric bicycles be allowed to drive on the bicycle path?
Yeah.
That go up to 28 miles per hour?
They're not allowed on the trail. I'm not sure if they'll allow it on these, but they're not allowed on the trail.
There are electric scooters on there. My wife was run
I'm
over
not
by
saying that they're
somebody
not
on an
doing it. I'm
electric
just saying
scooter, so.
they're not, there's supposed to be no motorized vehicles, which does
Let me,
include
let
electric.
me, at this
On a
point,
bicycle path.
there's no way we're gonna resolve this issue at this
Right.
meeting. I think it's.
No, I just hope
an-
it's
an
taken up,
issue that-
I hope it's taken up for future use because it is a very green way of transportation in Beaufort County.
I don't think they belong on bicycle paths.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a brief comment.
But yet, they'll paint the white line down of the street.
Keep this going. Go ahead.
One thing, I know there are a lot of other issues that's through time, but again, I'd like to say kudos, not because of the work that you've done, but I look on that slide and I see every municipality, including the county, and other counties participating in this program. And I love to see when the region gets together and works on a program, and that's what you've accomplished here, so congratulations on that. At least you're working on it.
Rob, how, I was also impressed in the way that Randy was, like the amazing group that you all assembled, or that Noah assembled. Tell me how the Beaufort County School District is responding, because I think, like, my priority, in fact, would be to get safe routes to schools for kids. And that would, like, much more than tourists, for example. I mean, I think, my own opinion is that the outside the plantation world of Hilton Head, a lot of those bike paths are accessed by tourists and are a big tourist draw, which is great. But on this side of the river, I think that, again, only my bias, would to have kids be able to ride their bikes to school, if that's possible, in some neighborhoods, and how they do it. So I wonder how the school district is responding.
Yeah, they were, Carol Crutchfield was on the task force and
Right.
was very active. And that was one of the criteria when that group, evaluated projects is this providing access to schools? So, it was, the other thing is there's some specific recommendations to talk, about, there's a program, Safe Routes to School.
Right.
And unfortunately, in South Carolina, it's not funded. So, there's direction on how we can start working and advocating for that at the state level.
I mean, there are some schools that are absolutely, like, ripe for that opportunity, and some that aren't, right? So there you go, but I mean, there is potential there.
Yeah, no, I always think of Pritchardville Elementary School is situated within walking very close to a lot of subdivisions, but there's no good connections, and-
Exactly,
And so
yeah.
that's just a kind of low-hanging fruit, making just a few connections to. make
I was
it
thinking
much
of
more-
Coosa on Ladies Island would be maybe
Yeah,
another one,
and
too.
One of the projects that's moving forward is Middle Road pathway coming from our 1 cent sales tax.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully that will accomplish some connected, especially between Rural Pines
Yeah.
and Coosa Elementary.
Just one last thing. In the Bluffton magazine today, Icon, there are 7 now golf cart dealers in Beaufort County. Icon Golf Carts ran a big ad that's saying, the future of neighborhood transportation, all right? I don't know if you saw it, it was in Bluffton magazine. I went in and I spoke to them, and they said most of their golf carts are not going out on the golf course. They're for private transportation. They're not equipped to go out on the golf course.
No, I live in Port Royal, and they're very common on the streets there, so.
Okay, so
All right, further comments? Can I have a motion then to adopt the Beaufort County Connects Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan 2021 as an appendix
So moved.
to the comprehensive plan.
I second.
All right. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Okay, that's a unanimous approval. Thank you very much, Rob. I will make this one comment, and I'm just going to make this too. In the American Planning Association's conference that they held in June, there was many discussions about multimodal transportation, and just about anything that could move on wheels or be motorized or electrized was thought of as a potential use to improve transportation to work, to particular nodes where then you could leave your car at the node and so on. So I don't rule out anything in the future. I do know in the community that I live in, golf carts are a big deal. But I also note that there needs to be a good public education on the safety of golf carts. Most of the golf carts I see, they don't have mirrors. They don't have seat belts. They're only 2 passenger unless you have something on the back. And I've seen many people with children driving around in golf carts.
It's dangerous.
My next door neighbor was unfortunately died from a golf cart accident, falling out and hitting her head on the road. Just speeding around a curve to try to avoid somebody. So I think before we get into that multimodal, we want to be sure that what we would recommend as a county government would be ensure safety in transportation so that we don't lose anybody from a inconsiderate action that's taken because we didn't develop an appropriate policy.
No, one of the things I wanted was even the golf carts that are older to be retrofitted with seat belts, all right, because there's children driving around in Beaufort sitting on their parents' laps. And very few of them have the South Carolina permit, all right, which has to be enforced. Safety has to be enforced. They've got to be equipped with turn signals, headlights, before anything like this happens.
Thank you for your comments, Frank. Okay, we're going to move on to the next issue, which is, I think, the last issue on the agenda for this evening. And that is a zoning map amendment zoning request for 56 acres at 60 Gaston Plantation Road from T2 rural to C3 neighborhood mixed use. I'm recusing myself from this discussion in order to avoid the perception of a conflict of interest. I'm turning the meeting over to my vice chair, who will conduct the meeting on this issue. Please don't forget that I'm waiting to come back. And I thank you. You want these?
Yeah, the comments.
Public comment sheet? Those are public comment sheets. Yeah.
Do them first.
However you want to do it. You want to introduce the issue here and then open it to public.
I only get this a couple of times a year, so I'm just going to go ahead and put it in front of me. I think the order that this should be would be, Rob, would you like to go first, then the applicant, then comments from the board, then comments from the public, and then we'll review again until we make an action on this important issue. So Rob, please.
Good evening, Vice Chairman.
Again.
So what we're looking at today is a request for a zoning amendment for a 56-acre property located at 60 Gaston Plantation Road, which is right off, actually, in the butts, Kalawasi Road, about halfway between the intersection of 170 and the bridge over to Kalawasi Island. The applicant is Kenneth Toski, and the current zoning of the property is T2 rural, as you can see in the green up there on the top. The proposed zoning is C3 neighborhood mixed use. T2 rural allows a density of 1 dwelling unit per 3 acres. So for the entire 56-acre site, that would allow 18 dwelling units on the site. And that's, of course, pending, access and wetlands and all those types of issues. But that's, generally what our ordinance allows. With the change to C3 neighborhood mixed use, which is primarily a suburban residential district, that would allow 2.6 dwelling units per acre, which could allow under the zoning up to 145 dwelling units. The applicant is interested, as they stated in their application, in developing less than that. I'm sorry, I had the number there. I believe it's
110.
18.
I think it's 110.
Okay, sorry about that. So they're interested in, developing a subdivision with a lower density, but it's important to remember when we're reviewing a rezoning application, we have to look at what their district allows. And so that is generally the request that is being made. When we looked at this proposed application, one of the things I wanted to state is that, and I think that most of you are aware, this is the same site that the Planning Commission at their June 7th meeting reviewed an appeal to a staff decision for a campground on that site. So I wanted to verify this is the same site. As staff, we believe, we understand that process is still under litigation and is not resolved, but we see this as a separate action. This is an action to amend the zoning ordinance and amend the zoning map for the property where that is a particular development review permit that is still in the process and being challenged. And so we received this application and deemed it proper to move forward with this and bring it to the Planning Commission. One of the things I wanted to mention is that this site, the future land use map for this site designates this area as rural, and really that is the case for this entire 170 corridor, really between Oldfield and the bridge across the Broad River. That is, been a county policy that's been in place, since we adopted our first comprehensive plan in 97, and that still remains. So this particular zoning change from the T2 rural to C3 neighborhood mixed use is not consistent with that future land use map in our comprehensive plan. And that is, of course, our existing comprehensive plan, 2010. Obviously, we're just reviewed the update of that plan, and that same policy still applies. So no change has been made in that area. This is still designated as rural. So that's an important, aspect that we look at when reviewing a zoning application like this. The other thing is that this project, just based on the number of dwelling units that are permitted, was deemed to generate greater than 50 peak hour trips. And as a result, our code requires the applicant to do a traffic impact analysis. They did that, and it was done by AECom, which is a qualified traffic engineering firm, and that is included in your packet. One of the things that they looked at is the impact of this development, the number of daily trips. And it's important to note that there's really no threat to, there's plenty of capacity on Kalawasi Drive and at the intersection that this particular development is not going to trigger overloading that road or the intersection. But the report did note that being that this property is located on a curve on Kalawasi Road, they recommended that the speed limit in this area be reconsidered as a result, because there are some site issues that would be related to a large subdivision entering onto that particular road at that location. We looked at the school capacity impacts. We sent an application to the Beaufort County School District. One of the things that they responded was, and I think that this is no surprise to anyone, but currently Okatee Elementary is at capacity along with the middle school and high school that would serve this particular site. So that has been an ongoing issue south of the Broad for the school district. I will note, however, that the county, that we adopted impact fees in conjunction with the school district for south of the Broad River. And, 110 single-family homes would generate about $1.38 million in impact fees, that could go for capital improvements for the school district. So it's important to weigh those two, that currently there is a lack of capacity, but now, it wasn't the case, even the last rezoning we looked at to the 170 corridor, there is a funding mechanism to feed into capital improvements for the school district created by the impact of future development. So as far as the recommendation, the proposed zoning change from T2 rural to C3 is in conflict with the future land uses laid out in the comprehensive plan. And this has basically been, since '99, as redone in 2010 and in our proposed comprehensive plan. And our zoning ordinance very closely mirrors our comprehensive plan. And this is just a snapshot of our zoning map along the 170 corridor. As you can see, Oldfield, and it's kind of hard to read, it kind of blends with but Oldfield is a plan unit development, and it's kind of a speckled color. And then you have Kalawasi Island, which is definitely higher density than the surrounding rural. But the plan in between those areas, including Spring Island, is designated as being rural, and the land uses, the zoning designation is either T2 rural or T2 rural neighborhood for the smaller properties. That's the darker green you see on there. And so as you can see on this map, this particular zoning change would introduce a density that is very much, not in keeping with the surrounding future land use and the zoning ordinance. And so from our standpoint, it is not supported in the comprehensive plan. And it is not our intention to change the land use policy in this area unless it was initiated by some sort of community level planning effort. Because, once you start with one property, then it becomes much more difficult to defend, not changing the next property that comes in. And as you could see, it's the other important thing, and I think we all recognize that across 170 is Jasper County and the city of Hardeeville, and there's quite a bit of development proposed for that area. But one of the things that we could do as a land use policy in Beaufort County, not only to protect the roads, the capacity of 170 and lessen congestion, is to hold back on our zoning and the density that we allow in that area. It also works as a good buffer between the development in Hardeeville and Jasper County, and then the sensitive environments of the Okatee and Colleton Rivers, which has been a real objective in the county to try to preserve as much land in those areas to limit the impacts of growth. And then also the rural quality of the 170 corridor. I think that we recognize that in the future, 170 is really the lifeline between people who live in the northern part of the county and work in the southern part of the county or in Savannah, and that the more congested that corridor becomes, the more difficult it becomes for, I guess what we take for granted now, that you could have two wage owners, one working in northern Beaufort County and maybe the other one working in Bluffton. For that reason, also preserving the capacity of that corridor is something that, we really emphasize in our land use policies. But we recognize it's a challenge, but I would, staff at this point does not recommend moving forward with this zoning change. And
Rob, just a question on the map.
Excuse me, let me recognize you. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I recognize you too. That little dipsy doodle over there where the dotted line comes out, is that Jasper County coming over onto the east side or south side of 170?
yeah, there is a little, dipsy doodles might be the right term, but it's Bailey, they call it Bailey's Loop.
Bailey's Loop,
I think it might
okay.
be also referred to as the Chelsea community, but yeah, there's a little piece of Jasper County that crosses 170 over there.
Is that where the multifamily is, past Oldfield? In Jasper County on that piece?
There is there is some multifamily in
Two
Oldfield,
developments, yeah.
in the Oldfield PUD. There's some
In the
townhouses.
PUD, okay.
Yeah.
Can I be-
Question.
Yeah, just one other quick question, again on the map. Explain the difference between the light green and the dark green. I think you did, but I don't know if I caught it.
Yeah, they're both zoning districts that implement our rural land use designation. But one of the things that we did, and this is going back several years, is that having the strict one dwelling unit per 3 acre density becomes a real hardship for people with smaller properties. And so at some point back in the late 90s, when our zoning and development standards ordinance was adopted, we did a mapping exercise where we identified where there were clusters of properties that are 5 acres or less and zoned them the dark green.
And what's their density?
That density is slightly less than one dwelling unit per acre. But what it's meant is to allow some, I would say equity and not put too much of an undue burden on small property owners with the rural land use policies. That's why you see they're kind of scattered throughout there.
Kevin, do you have any questions? Or we'll just go on down the line?
Well, I noticed when I went to look at the property yesterday, they're extending the right turn lane. Does that have anything to do with what they're planning? In other words, they've repaved it, and it looks like they've made it longer to accommodate more cars turning right onto Kalawasi Drive.
And he created a turn lane.
No, I don't, that wouldn't be related to this.
It's not related.
Frank, I saw that on a number of spots up 170, so that might just be part of some overall
Traffic
thing.
mitigation.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just
just
thought somebody might be trying to pull whatever they say, the cart before the horse
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
Mr. McMillan, do you have a comment?
I was just trying to clarify, do you mean it at the, where the gas station is and the traffic light at Snake Road, where there's the dedicated right-hand? That's, I mean, it's a good thing that they're clarifying there's a right-hand turn there. That's actually a very dangerous intersection. So, but I do think that's what it is. I agree, actually, Kevin. I think that's been going on.
Yeah.
Mr. Lawrence, do you have a comment? No. All right, thank you for now. Yeah.
Well, wait a second, I want to give everybody else a chance, but I have other questions. Can I be recognized again?
Yeah, you want to hear the presentation from the...
Okay, yeah, I'll wait.
The presentation from the applicant, please, who's going to speak on their behalf? I do have some comments, but I'm going to save mine all till last.
Good evening. My name is Jennifer Toski, and I am here at the request of my husband, Ken Toski, to speak on behalf of K&R Development. We are the developers for the property in question, and the reason for the application submission is just simply to make sure that we have turned over every stone that we can turn over before we make a final decision with regard to the campground that has been conceptually approved. We have spent probably the better part of 2.5 years seeking approval for this campground. We did not get a chance to speak with you all at the June Planning Commission meeting, but after that meeting, and to maybe paraphrase Mr. Merchant, sometimes the best laid plans deserve to be paused while you think. And before we proceeded with the final application for final approval with the campground, we wanted to make sure that the alternatives available to us were alternatives that we could genuinely consider. We have had numerous inquiries into the campground and whether or not we're going forward. People who want to buy it from us. We've also had inquiries into a single-family home option there. Again, builders, custom builders, semi-builders who would like to put up very low country style walkable neighborhood there. So I made application on behalf of K&R Development to see what we could do with the assistance of the Planning Commission. We are prepared to move forward with the campground. We have received all of the permitting and approvals that we need from the municipalities, from South Carolina Department of Transportation. The only thing we have not done is made final application to the Planning Department for the final approval. And what we lack in doing that is locking in the capacity fees for the Beaufort Jasper. That's a huge number, and when we write that check, we feel like we're moving forward with the campground. We are not going to be able to go backwards. So here I stand before you tonight asking for something that maybe is a little unorthodox. The C3 request is really not what we wanted, but it is the zone that would allow us to work within the parameters that we thought would be a good compromise for single-family homes on that parcel. And here I stand before you this evening. I've got Dan Kiefer and Jeff Ackerman with me to answer questions that you might have about how single-family homes may impact that particular parcel. So I'll be glad to answer any questions and see if I can shed some light on some things for you.
Can I be recognized?
Yes.
You mentioned capacity fees.
Yes.
What is that exactly?
So with the campground, they do a calculation for the usage of water and sewer, which is available to the site.
Okay.
And we have to pay that now as part of the final application, the final approval from the Planning Department to get the approval to move forward.
Okay.
So that has to be paid, then we take that certificate to with the final application, and the final approval is signed off on.
Anybody else have questions? Mrs. Toski? No. I would like to ask something.
Yes, sir.
I feel used. You've got the campground, you got the C3. What's it going to be? I'm a planner, and I've never in my experience had a client or an applicant or I think I'm the longest sitting person on this board here, go through two processes at the same time. And personally, I feel very uncomfortable, and I'm disappointed I don't have an attorney here for the county. And as a result, I would like to know, is this a legal action for us to consider your application while you've got a pending application and pending litigation, I understand also, correct?
Well, no, I don't have pending litigation against anyone.
They have against you.
And I'm not part of that litigation.
But there is pending litigation against you all, as I understand?
No.
No.
The pending litigation is against, my understanding is against the county. The appellants who have fought the campground for the last couple of years, after the June Planning Commission meeting, I understand filed an action or a couple of actions in circuit court. So while we are not directly impacted by that, we're also very cognizant of the fact that, the county could be in a situation that if we move forward, who knows? We are prepared to move forward with our campground. And honestly, it's not the campground that we had envisioned on the property. What should have taken 90 days to get an approval in 2019 has been replanned and redrawn, and here we sit today. And, single-family homes is not something that we had ever considered for the parcel. When we bought the land, we bought it with the intention of doing a campground. That's how it was sold to us. There was a sign on the property that said Kalawasi Campground. We did our homework. The Beaufort County Land Bible, the CDC, said that a campground was a permitted use. It said that a semi-developed campground and a primitive campground were permitted uses. We went a little bit further. We decided that semi-developed is something that we would really like to do on the property. We had limited the number of RV sites. I think we were capped at 110. We had huge buffers. We had planned for gas lantern gates. You'd have never seen an RV. It would have never happened. As far as, the activity on the site, it was heavily buffered, really nice state-of-the-art facility. when we received that final approval for that campground, there was an appeal filed. And at that point, and I'm not an attorney and we were caught off guard, but at that point we were told that a semi-developed campground was not a permitted use. That there was conflict within the code itself. And some small conflict was brought up and we decided not to fight it. I mean, here we were sitting, and if you don't know me personally, I'm not a contentious person. You know, if there's an alternative way to do things, I'll look at it, I'll do it. So we were told that you cannot do semi-developed. The appeal actually said you must do a primitive campground. You have no choice, you must do primitive. It just so happened that the economy was changing, COVID was hitting. I did some research and some study and found out that the primitive campgrounds were actually carrying about 55% of the market for campgrounds right now. Not everybody can afford a $750,000 RV, but everybody can afford a pop-up camper or a tent or something along those lines that is a little bit easier to manage. So it's a burgeoning industry right now. The glamping is what's all the rage, you know, these canvas tents on raised bases. So we thought, okay, if we're going to have to do this, then we're going to have to make up in density what we were losing with the larger RV sites. And there is no cap under the Beaufort County design guidelines. You can put as many sites as you can fit on the site. Your restrictions were very limited. Your buffers went to next to nothing. And we thought, well, this kind of seems counterproductive to what our original plan was. But if this is what we have to do, this is what we have to do. So we designed accordingly. And then after that June meeting, I was approached by several members of the immediate community. And just so you know, I was born and raised in this area. I'm probably one of the few people that will stand before you and say, my lineage goes back to the Native American tribes here in the Low Country. My mother is of a Cherokee Native American lineage. So I've been here my entire life. My family has been here eons of generations. So I've seen the growth and I've seen the development. And I have family in that area down there, along Chichesi and Okatee and Kalawasi. I can remember when Kalawasi wasn't Kalawasi. So I was contacted and said, hey, why don't you do a single family development? And I'm like, I can't. I really thought I couldn't. So I never asked the question. But the more I thought about it and I looked at it, and I went back to the T2R zone requirements for single family, the density just wasn't feasible. It's not that I didn't want to do it. It's just by the time you develop a 56-acre parcel for 18 homes, the cost of that development per the guidelines, you lose money. You lose money or you break even. And as much as I'd love to stand here and say I'm noble and I don't do this for income, I do it for some income. I mean, we're builders and developers. And the campground, you know, so we backed up, and the campground was our retirement. That's what we were going to kind of go out on a bang with. And I started looking at single family homes, and I said, well, maybe, perhaps if I can get a rezone of the property and we can introduce a single family plan that's an alternative use and it makes sense, then why not try to pursue it? So it was never intended to make you feel used or to, you know, we don't know what we're doing. We know full well what we were planning to go forward with, and that is a campground. And at this point, a primitive campground. You know, we've paid a lot of money in 2.5 years to get to a conceptual approval on the campground. And before we paid a lot more money to secure that capacity certificate, because we don't know if those fees would be non-refundable or transferable or what they would be. I thought, you know what, we'll give this a shot. And I really wanted to get before you last month, but we missed the deadline. I just didn't have everything I needed to get before you, and I really didn't know what zone to ask for. The C3 zone seemed to fit the size of the lot. It gave us depth in the lot, which also made the buffer from the perimeter even wider. We have no intention of doing any type of commercial development. we would enter into any development agreement that made sense and limited what we did there. And being from this area and watching the growth over the decades, you know, to have a smaller walkable neighborhood was something that I thought would be an alternative use that would appeal to the Planning Commission. So the C3 zone was a request to say, hey, we're asking for C3, but we're going to cap what we're doing. You know, if you could make a positive recommendation to send it on to county council, then at that point, we would get serious about a development agreement and limit what we do within, you know, the confines of that agreement. Additionally, we would give up the rights to the campground and under the T2R and go from there. But I thought it was worth a shot to ask before we get too far down the road of not being able to turn back.
All right, anyone else have any comments? No? Yes.
So we're talking about a 56-acre piece of property, 110 homes. So would this include an HOA?
It would include an HOA. And I want, if you don't mind, I'd like to have Dan Kiefer, who's the land planner, come up and address some of the concerns, because I do know after speaking with Dan that even at 110, that would be the maximum number. I don't think by the time we factored in open space and stormwater and buffers that we'd even end up with, we'd probably max out around 85 or 90. But Jeff Ackerman and Dan Kiefer are here to kind of address any questions you might have along those lines.
All right.
Chairman?
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as my notes go.
Please state your name.
Dan Kiefer, it's Whitmer Jones Kiefer.
Thank you.
As far as our next step, this is really the first step of the planning effort. And in terms of getting from this step to a development agreement where we can go from C3 was sort of the starting point. And what we're looking at is if we go C3, that allows us to do the residential lots. So C3, they're 70 foot wide, single family lots. And there's a square footage minimum. It's around 11,800 square feet. So you're looking at a 70 foot by 160 foot lot. And again, as far as the next step, we'll have to look at the existing tree cover, natural resources, wetlands. And as we started looking at that, which we haven't gotten fully into, we'll have to follow all the code requirements. So we're going to be lower than 110, probably lower than 100 units once we take into account the natural resources and all the other conditions. So tonight's really just the first step. If C3, if there was another zoning district that was just residential that could accommodate this, we wouldn't be asking for C3. If we could do the PUD, is the map that Rob was showing, the speckled areas of Kalawasi, Spring Island, and Oldfield, those are PUDs. So that's really what once we overlay the C3 and the development agreement, will essentially be a PUD. We can't ask for that tonight, so the C3 is our starting point. And then in terms of some of the other questions related to traffic and development patterns, those will all go back through the development code process to answer all those questions. So we're not really, we're ahead of ourselves by even having a plan or an idea of what we want to do, but in terms of getting to the next step to council, we have to start here with C3, then we can move on to C3 and the development agreement. And the development agreement will outline maximum densities, buffers or increased buffers if that's the case, and any other additional requirements beyond what C3 allows. Or it may strike through multifamily, things that we are not allowed will be taken off the list.
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Kiefer?
Yeah, I mean, not really a question, but if it's okay, I have kind of a comment. Is, you know, 'cause one of the problems we run into is, yeah, we go ahead and approve or recommend approval for this upzoning, and then at some point, property's sold and somebody else comes in, you know, I just want y'all to be aware that it's not as simple. And I do feel like that both of y'all are genuine in what you're saying, but things happen, and, you know, we are trying to work through a comprehensive plan and be consistent throughout the county and what we're doing. And I know y'all have all heard all this already, but it's not just as easy as us saying, hey, we're going to give you an upzoning, and we can take your word that you're going to do a PUD on this piece of property. And I actually do believe you. I mean, that's not the issue. But I just want y'all to understand on our end that there's a lot of extenuating factors.
My understanding with that came up at some point in conversation, and I can't remember which of the attorneys suggested it, but certainly deed restrictions and the development agreement would have an expiration date in it, that if it was not completed within 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, that the property then would then revert to the T2R.
Right.
I can tell you after 2.5 years, we're ready to move forward one way or the other.
I can sympathize with you, yes.
Yeah, and, you know, if, like I said, if it was a viable alternative and you could make a recommendation to council, provided we enter into a development agreement based on what we have presented, then that puts us, like Dan said, one more step closer to getting everything kind of nailed down. I didn't want to go through the motions of drafting a development agreement if you guys just saw no hope for it, because it's kind of like, you know, we want the endorsement from the Planning Commission. We want it to be something that we're in this together all the way through to the council part. But if it was just a flat no, then that gave us direction. And I would at that point feel like we've done everything we can in our power to offer an alternative up. I don't think it's any secret that the community at large does not want us to do a campground. I mean, I've seen a petition with almost 4,000 signatures on it. I've had nice and not so nice phone calls from people who have been like, I can't believe you grew up here and you do this. And, you know, it's, again, we were abiding by the development code.
Yeah.
And wanting to make sure we've gone down the road of land trust, conservation easement. The property was deemed ineligible under the natural resources guidelines as being critical lands. So we were turned away at that level for any type of conservation easement program that we could have gone into. And we knew that asking was going to be something that that would put you out of a comfort zone potentially. But if we brought you back into the comfort zone with the development agreement and very strict deed restrictions and a timeline of performance, or it reverts, that's what we were kind of hoping we'd get considered for.
Kevin? Thank you. The neighbors.
Yes, sir.
Any comments from the neighbors? Any thing you want to share with us about the neighbors?
Well, as you know, the neighbors who are adjacent to the south border of the property, for the first time, I was able to speak with them after the June Planning Commission meeting, much to the chagrin of our attorneys, I think. But, you know, I want to be a good neighbor and explain what I was doing. I didn't want them to see a rezone sign go up and go, what is she crazy? The initial feedback was they'd have to have more information on what we were doing there, and it was a very preliminary conversation I had with them at the time. But at least I was left with the impression that there might be some flexibility with them in looking at this. So that kind of gave me the hope to go forward and meet with Dan and Jeff Ackerman and let's work up something that we thought would be an alternative use.
As I see, I'm looking at your map here and I'm looking at the two different maps over here. And after what Rob was explaining to us, the difference between the dark green, the light green, and I want to make sure that this is not taken the wrong way. We're not in a negotiation with you or anything like that at all. But I would just state for the record that I could never go along with anything that exceeded the dark green, if that makes any sense. Because you have to keep some standard, you know, and I'm just thinking out loud, and I'm not saying yes or no to anything.
Right.
But that would be something that taking a piece of property and changing it from green to a bright yellow is one thing, changing it to another possible shade of green, I don't know. I mean, it would, I guess, and the other, I asked about the HOA, and the reason why I ask is there a threshold where a certain amount of homes that you have to do an HOA? Is there gonna be water and sewer in here?
Yes, there's water and sewer, and there will be, and there is planned water and sewer for the campground. And by contrast, the campground we've only sought the approval for the Phase 1 section of the campground, which is the front section. And as it is conceptually approved today, there are 350 campsites. Again, the back parcel of 36 acres, we are in the process of planning right now, could potentially be another 400 campsites. So in that aspect, when we were looking at an alternative for the site under the T2R zone, the highest and best use is the campground, probably followed by the transfer station, which is a permitted use under a T2R. We have been contacted by some waste companies. We just didn't entertain it. But, there are some things within the T2R that when you look at it, it's hard to, it's not an apples to apples comparison, so to speak. So, and the T2R end zone, we talked about that zone. And I can't remember what, we talked about that zone and we talked about C3. And I think it was the lot size in C3 that really appealed to me because of its depth. And, I thought at that point, if we self-cap the number of lots within a C3, that might be the better alternative if we are allowed to do single-family homes.
I have a quick question. And this could include Rob as well. I don't know how we're going to do this, but I know the T2RN is really not set up for larger parcels as much, but what was your plan? What about the lot size didn't work with the T2R neighborhood center?
The density.
It was the density that I think we capped out at 67 lots, 65 lots, somewhere around there. And then by the time Dan looked at some of the open space requirements and whatnot, it put us at a number that became, again, not feasible. The cost to get the infrastructure in place for 40 to 67 lots and 85 to 90 lots is, you have a lot of base cost that doesn't change. At that point, we would be better off stepping back and going back to the campground. It just made, that number of 85 to 90 lots was that sweet spot that made it
Work.
not as lucrative as the campground, but made it work.
One more question. Did y'all consider a kind of a mixture of a campground and some residential, even if you had like a caretaker's portion, somebody that was living there that was actually looking after it? I mean, I'm just throwing stuff out there.
The primitive guidelines are very specific as to what you can do. We had even a hard time getting the bathhouses and common buildings approved under that plan. I don't think that we could mix it per the code. And I could be wrong, but I'll check that.
You're probably right.
And I envision, when I think of single family there, I envision a walkable neighborhood, not a gated community, but something that has some passive open space and the traditional low country architecture homes that almost like a very miniature Habersham style community there, which would be a nice, in my opinion. I know I'm not, on the governing panel, but transitioning from 170 to that in that community, and then on further back to Mike Drive and Hayward Point and the golf club and Kalawasi, and
Yeah.
It's,
And I have one more of a statement that I'd like to say is that I've seen in the past where you have people that do come and or try to work within the system to do something that is good for the community, get frustrated, leave, and somebody else comes in and does something that's not so good for the community on the same parcel. So that's one thing, everyone, including the neighbors, I know that this is contentious, but everybody needs to be aware of that. Sometimes there are unintended consequences.
and that's part B of why I'm standing here. While we can control what happens to the site, while it's under our control to manage it as best we can put deed restrictions in place. We can do something that, that might be more palatable for the neighbors.
Thank you. Rob, can I get the Cliff Notes version of why the luxury park, the one you just described, Ms. Toski,
The semi-developed.
what was there, is there a Cliff Notes version, I guess?
Rob, will you come forward for the record?
Yeah.
For your comments are on the record.
Is he recognized?
I would start answering that question. I just don't think we should get mired into the details of campgrounds, because that's not what we're looking at this meeting. I'm willing to answer your question, but this is a rezoning from T2 rural to C3 neighborhoods.
I guess let me give the reason why I'm asking you.
Okay.
Because there is one. Could that luxury park, or whatever they call it, advanced something, could that go into a C3?
No, none of the campgrounds, are allowed in the C3 district.
Okay.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to mention, I would strongly urge the Planning Commission to really consider this as a straightforward rezoning. Deed restrictions, development agreements, those are things that, a decision made at this point, is the straightforward rezoning. Those are extra things that could occur, but are not necessarily going to occur, based on the recommendation.
Right, they can't occur.
Yeah, and I'm not aware, and I'd have to seek legal opinion, but I'm not aware that you could use a development agreement to revert the zoning back to what it was originally, because that's tying the hands of, it's basically making a future council have to take action to do something. When you change the map, you're changing the ordinance, and I'm not aware that a development agreement could have make something automatically revert back to what it was. I just think that those are important things for the commission to consider in making the decision, to look at this as a straightforward rezoning. I think that I agree that the owner may have very good intentions for the development of this property, but none of those things, right now, the only things we have control over are what the existing zoning and what is being proposed.
Ms. Merchant, I respect what you said about the matter on the table right now is the zoning. But I still have this cloud or this thought, is this and all due respect, okay, I'm doing my job here, is part of their strategy to go back to the campground, which she so dearly wants. And by passing this zoning, may allow that to happen from a legal standpoint. So again, I'm also was hoping that we'd have some legal counsel here, and we don't. And I would also like to, because I wanted to ask exactly where does the request for the campground stand right now with Beaufort County and approval or non-approval?
Well, I will say that the change in zoning to C3, one thing that I could say for certain is that the C3 neighborhood mixed-use district does not have any provisions for campgrounds. And I'm not prepared to speak on the status of the campground, the appeal, and where that is in its process.
Okay, so we would need a legal counsel there. And Hayward Point is a PUD?
No, Hayward Point basically was approved under the rural zoning. So the density of Hayward Point, there's a lot of preserved open space within that development, and the average lot size is much larger than what is being proposed for this
Because
site.
of the wetlands?
Well, it's also because the rural zoning was in place at the time, before Hayward Point was developed. So they did not have the option to do a PUD or anything like that.
And under the C2, what other non-residential uses are permitted and what percentage of the development can that be?
Well, there are some non-residential uses allowed in the C3 district. Most of them have requirements for being located on a major collector or arterial, and I will have to research some of those. I would say that for this site, the most likely types of development, obviously the single-family subdivision, which could go up to 2.6 dwelling units per acre, which is where we had that estimate of about, I can't remember the total number, it was about 130 units. There is an option for a traditional community plan, I believe neighborhood scale, which could allow slightly higher density than that, and that is a mechanism that allows for the development of more of a traditional community like Habersham, with sidewalks and porches and the like. That has very specific requirements for how the community is laid out. So there are other options available, but primarily it's a residential district.
Okay.
I have a quick question, if it's okay. Does the zoning board of appeals have the authority to do a waiver for them to do a semi-primitive campground? Or is that, how would that work if they wanted to stay with T2 and then move to the more big RV style campground? Is that an avenue that's even possible?
Well, I'm not really prepared to speak on that, and
Okay.
it's really not relevant to the zoning.
Yeah, we can always put.
They do have there is a conceptual plan that has been prepared for primitive campground.
All right, thank you. I think right now we have some comments from the public who've been very patient through some important business that we've conducted tonight. So I'll just take them one at a time here, if I may. Mike Thomas, Senior.
That's Thomas Mike.
Oh, that's the way it's written. I'm sorry. Thomas Mike.
Good evening. My name is Thomas Mike, and my family and I, we own the property down Mike Drive, adjacent to the proposed development. Now, let me say this to Ms. Kosky and her representative. I have nothing against you guys. I think everybody has a right to develop their property. But we are governed by the zoning that's in the area. Now, it has been mentioned by this gentleman here to my left, and by you guys in agreement that the county zoning, the current county zoning does not allow for high density, and that it's zoned for rural residential. Now, years back, I spent 2 terms on the planning commission in your position. And when and as you guys are recommended body to county council, when we made a recommendation for the zoning to stay as it is, that's what we meant. Now, I'm not in support of this development, because by allowing this zoning to take place as being requested, that's just gonna open the floodgate. That's all it's gonna do to development. We both know that. It's gonna open the floodgate to development. And that's not something that is consistent with this neighborhood. It's not consistent at all. Now, I don't know listening to Ms. Kosky, she indicated that she has some vested interest. Well, I have a great interest in this community. We've been down here, and our family owned that property for well over 100 years. And we're not trying to sit here and sit back and just watch it on television and watch this development this zoning change to open up to high density development. That's not gonna happen on my watch. Not as long as I stay down that street. And whether if I leave from down that street, it's still not gonna happen. We're not looking for that. Now, there are some other places in Beaufort County that one can go out and buy, purchase, and go develop that. But we're interested in keeping that the way it is right there. Rural residential, that's mirrors the county wishes, mirror the county zoning, and that's what we want to see. So this backdoor approach to try to get more density, to get more houses, development in that area is wrong, and that should not be allowed. Now, when you guys make your recommendation to county council, remember that we have a step to follow, and that is the current comprehensive plan. Rural residential, C3, or T3, I'm sorry, T2, and not the C3 neighborhood mixed use. That, it doesn't align itself with the current comprehensive plan. It doesn't align itself to what we on Mike Drive, Hayward Point, Kalawasi community desire. And I can personally speak for us, those of us on Mike Drive, and I feel almost certain I can speak for Hayward Point adjacent property owners, that we don't want that. So as you make your decision and as a deciding recommended body for county council, remember, that is what you go by, the current zoning, that reflect the vision of Beaufort County for that area, and that's what we want to see. Nothing else now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mike.
Thank you, sir.
William Metheny? Please state your name for the record when you come forward and your address, please.
Good evening, and thank you for my opportunity. My name is William Metheny. I live in Hayward Point. And I've been following this for a long period of time. And for about a year, the fire marshal said no, he couldn't permit a campground to go in there because there was no two entrances. And if you look at the map, they got very small road frontage. Now, I don't remember, but it was sometime in the very near past future, we had a bad storm came through Beaufort. And the apartment complexes over here on Savannah Highway, which are high density developments, power lines came down. Sheriff's Department went out there, and you couldn't go in, up or down that highway, and the people in those apartments couldn't get in or out. Fire department couldn't get in or out. Now, as a patient that had open heart surgery 3 years ago, I know every second counts. So, I don't know what happened 2 years ago when the fire marshal was saying you got to have two entrances. In the June meeting, he said, oh, well, they're going to split it right here in front. That's two entrances. I don't understand that. And then the proof in the pudding is when this storm came through and nobody could get out of those apartments up there, if they cut their finger that morning, they would have bled to death because nobody could get in or out. So I'm just saying, and I'm not an expert on this. I made a career of herding cats. I was an engineer at the Navy Hospital. I had to get federal funds and keep doctors happy and patients happy. And I understand y'all have a very difficult job, and I'm not saying I'm an expert on what y'all are doing. I'm just saying, I've heard a lot on this. I'm concerned with safety. I've heard people up here saying, hey, we need to put seatbelts on every golf cart coming off now and every golf cart that's ever been manufactured because we don't want anybody dead. I don't want to see anybody die, okay? I want to keep a safe neighborhood, and I just want to know, how did that code get changed when the fire marshal was dead set that you had to have two entrances? We just put a split driveway up front. I don't understand that. Thank you for your time.
Jesse White?
Good evening. Thank you. My name is Jessie White on behalf of the Coastal Conservation League. We respectfully request that you deny this rezoning. As laid out in the staff report, this upzoning request is not consistent with the comprehensive plan, the existing comprehensive plan, or the draft 2040 comprehensive plan that was before you this evening. It's a significant increase in density, and it's incompatible with the surrounding area. The existing land uses are rural residential, golf courses, and forestry. And as has already been stated, by allowing this rezoning to occur, it will lead to subsequent rezonings on adjoining parcels, and taken together will begin to change the rural character of this area, and it will place further strain on the already strained SC 170 corridor. The comprehensive plan intentionally designated this area as rural, and it did so to minimize some of those strains, to minimize the strains that the school system's feeling, that our water quality in our rivers, the May River in particular, and the Okeechobee River are feeling. And it's important that those policies, when they're passed and adopted, be upheld, because we have them for a reason, both our comprehensive plan policies and our zoning ordinances. And if they're ignored at the request of a specific individual on a case-by-case basis, then their underlying intent is eroded, and enforcement of future policies and zoning standards will also be eroded. So for all of those reasons, we agree with planning staff and respectfully request that this rezoning be denied. Thank you.
Thank you. For the record, she sent a letter to the Planning Commission, and it's part of the record at this time, and it'll be available to whoever would like it, would like to look at it. I've got Deborah Holbrook, but you wanted to speak on, is she here? On Cherokee Farms, and that's been pulled off, and we're not talking about that, but I will keep this for the next meeting and pass it on to the chairman, so if she wants to speak at that time. I always like to give the applicant one more bite at the apple, okay, and be the last one to speak. So if you want to address any of the comments that are up here, or any of the comments from the citizens that have spoken, now's your opportunity.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Dan Kiefer. The only thing I'd like to add would be the density question. That's where with the C3 zoning and the development agreement and the negotiations with the county to form that development agreement, that's where the density will be significantly lower than what the C3, the intent of C3 is, as far as the other multifamily uses and townhomes, things like that. But as far as our density and the preservation of natural resources, we're going to be limited on what we can do based on, one, the single-family homes, and two, the natural resources on the property. And then as far as the other comment in regards to access points, we have several options for secondary access points that we would be looking into, and that would be something that we would look through as we go through the development code and the planning of the property. So we'd certainly take that into consideration, and something we would work on.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Vice Chairman. My name is Angelica Caldwell. I'm here. I'm from Nexon Pruitt in Charleston, and we're representing the developers. Cheryl Shaun has previously been here, and I think Nicole Scott, who are two of my colleagues, both of whom got called away, so I'm here to fill in. I'm just here to, again, to follow up on the density concerns that we've heard from the public commentary. That's not the primary purpose of this request. It wasn't to increase the density, not trying to change it in that manner. And as far as the status of the pending campsite application is going, Mrs. Toski has, I believe, one more meeting. If she just submits all the paperwork and all the application is completed, that just needs to be submitted for final approval in order to get that. So after one meeting, that would be the only thing left in completing that process.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant? Yeah. I understand what Rob was saying about what we're tasked to do is the C2 zoning, not the C3 zoning, excuse me, not what's going on with the campsite or how close it is, but it does confuse me. And 40 years of planning and 20 years being in Bluffton and doing a lot of planning in Bluffton and being on this board, I am confused from the standpoint of what if we know what we want to vote on, but do you want us to vote on that, or do you want to wait until all those answers? Because he's correct, is we can't assume that you're going to have a development agreement, or the development agreement will be accepted, because it'll be out of our hands. We won't have a thing to say about it once we either approve or deny your application. And I mean this in all sincerity. I'm a new urbanist, so I mean, and I'm not a spot zoner.
Right.
Okay.
I would just be more comfortable if we knew, like you said, the access points. You have things in the plan, but we don't know what they are.
Well, we don't have right now it's a conceptual. Our understanding was for us to get this final approval for a rezone, we would go through the process and end up before county council for 3 readings. And at that point, prior to getting to county council, we would have to cross the T's and dot the I's and get that development agreement drafted and nailed down and have a specific plan for these home sites where we could address what is the open space, what the final density will be, what we were seeking and hoping to get the commission to consider. And we know that this is not our final resting place, that county council 3rd reading is our final resting place. But if there was support for, hey, this is an alternative for them, provided they do this in accordance with what they're saying, then we could recommend that council take this up and look at it in more depth. You know, my granddaddy used to say to me, he said, you know, Jen, don't outsmart your common sense. If your common sense is telling you something, then go with it. You know, I know that if you look at it on the face, that it's just a simple rezone. That's what it is. But for me, it's not. For me, it's 2.5 years of getting a campground approval. And the only thing preventing me from getting a final approval is payment of those capacity fees. We've met all the other requirements. And on the conditional approval or the conceptual approval that was issued to us, it states on there, ready for final. So, you know, she can send off for final approval now. And I believe it was Mr. Greenway in the June meeting and it's when my ears perked up, he said the only thing that's really going to stop this campground is if the Toskis decide they don't want to do it. So while I understand on the surface this is a rezone request from T2R to C3, in my simple mind as a layperson, I'm looking at 700 campsites or a rezone to maybe 85 or 90 single-family homes. So from your perspective, I get the conundrum. From my perspective, I'm sitting here thinking, well, this could be something that's a viable alternative. And maybe it's not. Maybe in the position it puts you in, you can't do it. Or maybe you can recommend it with conditions. You know, we kind of want to see where it goes, but I also don't want to lay out another $50,000 to get a development agreement drafted if there's no support for it. I get it's an unusual request. I think developers come before you often and they want to say, hey, I can build 20 homes, but I want you to rezone because I want to build, 250 homes. I'm standing before you going, I can do 700 campsites, or I can do 85 or 90 homes with the approval and the authority that the commission and the county could give me. So it's a little bit different. It's very unorthodox, and it's confusing, I understand. From your perspective, I understand why it's confusing. But to me, it's one of those, well, it's kind of a common sense thing. And so I didn't want to outsmart myself on it. I wanted to come before you and see what I could do.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Stosky. Yeah. All right, any further comments before we?
Yeah, I wasn't a fan of the campground, but it's a permitted use, it's a permitted use. By not really in love with this 110 homes, pushed in there, spot zoning, whatever you want to call it. My real issue is it's not 80 or 90 homes from where we're sitting. What it is it's 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 more homes. If this zoning change goes through, you're going to see before Christmas at least 2 more applications in here for that. And one of them is going to be for another upzone. And I'll bet anybody a cup of coffee here that the second one is going to be for a campground, because the work's already been done. The marketing's already been done. There is a demand for a campground. I believe me, I'm not a camper. I don't like, it's not me. I'm a Marriott guy. But that's been proven. That's already been established. The plans have been even submitted, I understand, to the plan. So I'm really struggling with this. First of all, we can't negotiate, even if we wanted to, even if we were capable of negotiating the best agreement. Right now, as it stands right now, I would, if there were a motion and if there were a second, and I'm not saying that there is, I would vote this down, okay? But with that, if there were a zone in that could go in there with less density than this one, this C3, because again, I'm not looking at this particular one. Yeah, this is 130 and we're going to make it 110 and we're going to get down to 80, but it's the ones down the road. They're going to be thousands, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000. And I'm not going to even say a number. I have a number in my head, but I'm not going to say a number. But I don't know if that zone exists. I really don't. I'm not an expert on the plan. So I don't know. That's really all I have to say on it. That's really all I have to say on it.
Anyone else? All right, not hearing any more. Do I have a motion for action?
Sure, I'll make a motion. I move to support the planning staff and their rationale against approval for this upzoning, spot zoning, however it's characterized, based on their rationale. We haven't even talked about the school issues here, about the incapacity of the schools in this district to support children of families who presumably will move there. So I would vote to support the staff and turn down this request for upzoning.
I'll second it.
If you would, do you have an agenda? If you could read that subject part, so we've got the 56 acres, R600, la, la, la.
Just use the screen.
I'm sorry, so you want me to put this data into my motion?
Yes.
Okay.
So we know
All right,
specifically.
so I move to support the planning staff to deny the zoning map amendment rezoning request for 56 acres at 60 Gaston Plantation Road from T2 rural to C3 neighborhood mixed use.
Second?
I second it.
I have a first and second. Motion and second on the floor. All in favor, please raise your hand. It's unanimous. I must say as a footnote, again, I'm a new urbanist. Everything I do is new urbanist. But spot zoning is not, unfortunately, wait till it grows to you and then do that. But it was a very tough decision for all of us. up here, and I thank you, and good luck in your work. You've got a good team. Yeah, you can bring the chairman out, I had enough. I give this couple things, gladly. And that seat got real hot.
I didn't see much here.
I'm with Kevin.
I mean,
Back to what you said, it'll grow.
I mean, the area
Really grow.
is full of luxury homes. You know,
You all had fun? Entertaining?
We missed you, Ed.
Good time?
Did you bring us pizza? Did you bring us coffee?
Did you watch it on,
Like, they couldn't watch it.
not even on the Beaufort County, but Easement?
No, I think you're even allowed to do that.
Okay. Yeah, the seat got real hot. So, these are.
These need to go back to,
And there's one lady who's going to talk next time.
Is that it, so?
Yeah, I forgot to ask about.
All right, I'm going to, unless there's objection or there are other business to declare, I'm going to, it's a late hour, I'm going to declare this meeting over unless there are any objections. Okay, meeting is adjourned. Home.